Okay, so the video failed during the session, so I thought I'd go through the remaining points via basically an upload. Um, so we'll kick off where we went off, and we were talking about some of the parameters or terms you need to understand that we use as input into a training stress plan. We spoke briefly in the session around CTL, ATL, and TSB. I'll quickly revise those. And CTL is critical training load. It's essentially the training stress accumulated over the last 42 days. And we see that as the measure of fitness. So over 42 days, generally you're building up your base. If you stop training, it would take some time for that training to be lost. So we see that accumulation as your measure of fitness at that point in time. The next one is the acute training load. So that's the average training stress for the last 7 days. Why we call that acute is, it's generally they tend to be sharp bumps on the performance management chart that take fairly quickly. We can recover from them, but they are the peaks, like a 6-hour ride. It's going to take you 2 days to recover from that. And what that really is at any point in time your measure of fatigue, how much fatigue you're carrying in your body. The last one is training stress balance, TSB. Essentially CTL minus ATL, which we see as the readiness to race. So if it's way down and a negative, obviously we turn up to a race, we're just not going to be able to perform because fatigue is high. What we like to see is readiness to race to be TSB to be about 10 to 15 plus 15. The higher doesn't mean it's better. For instance, if we let it go up to 30, what will be happening is your fitness will be falling at the same time. So plus 15 gets a good balance where your readiness race is above the CTL, but we haven't lost a lot of fitness along the way. So really important terms. You don't have to know or remember them, but when you look at the performance chart, the CTL will be the blue line that steadily goes upwards, hopefully, and then during our off weeks just drops down a little bit. ATL is the pink line, which has a lot of peaks in it, just showing where you've put in efforts, your hard sessions, etc., and drops down relatively quickly because it's taking a 7-day average as you recover. TSB is a good line to watch if you want to do a race, or even if it's a B or C race, how well rested you are for that race, so you can actually set your expectations accordingly. Again, TSB is the one we really monitor and taper. Other definitions, I'll skip over a couple of these quickly, but the important one is intensity factor. So that's the intensity factor within a session. One is basically your maximum effort for 1 hour. So it's the maximum you could do that discipline for 1 hour where you really need to stop. It's your race effort, basically, 1 hour race effort. Whereas 0.7 is around about your aerobic threshold. So if you're slightly below or at your aerobic threshold, we record it as a 0.7. That is calculated to give you your TSS for that session. Simple calculation. It's the basically intensity factor times 10 squared will give you your multiplied by the hours will give you your training stress for that session. So if you're at 0.7 times 10 is 7, squared is 49. So if you 0.7 session, typical swim session would be about that. Would give you a training stress score of 49. It's important that when we're recording sessions, if we didn't have a heart rate monitor with us, or we didn't have our Garmin, to go in and actually add the intensity factor to that session so it can actually calculate the training stress score for us. So if it's not there, it won't calculate it, and then our algorithms start getting out and our totals for training stress are wrong. Variability is more about time trialing. We try to keep our variability across the session to 0.2 in the time trial. Not really relevant to training other than practice. But the guys at Kona, it's really trying to keep a steady power, steady heart rate across the session, across the race, and not have too much variability on the hills and downhills, etc. Applying power on the downhills, keep racing, and backing it off on the uphills, so we don't spike our power and burn matches, etc. So variability is just more racing discipline and an in-session discipline factor. Really important one is efficiency factor. It's one of the ones. The next two are the ones I really monitor closely on athletes to see how they're performing and what training to actually give them. Efficiency factor is basically your power or your pace divided by heart rate. So what that gives us is how efficient you are moving across the ground. Heart rate being the input, pace or power being the output. If your heart rate's high to achieve pace, basically your efficiency factor is going to be low. So good aerobic fitness coupled with good technique biomechanics on and power base on the run will give you a high efficiency factor. Ironman qualifiers generally hit efficiency factor of 1.5. Ironman qualifier bikes generally hitting around 1.7. Typically a novice who's ready for Ironman will come in at about probably 1.2. And likewise in the bike is probably going to come out 1.3 or around there, and we need to invest heavily to on aerobic fitness and technique generally to get the bigger numbers, but they are important. If we want to qualify, those are the things we need to be doing. It's not just about getting out there and training, it's about focus. The last one is decoupling. We went to that in depth. We're looking for 7% below 70%, preferably below 5 on a measured run at aerobic to understand if you've got the aerobic fitness for the distance before we invest in power. I won't go over that. We went through that one in depth. I think that's it for now. And the next slide. Fortunately, I've created a calculator on FitSets.com that goes through and helps you calculate these figures. So you can just punch in your FTP, your kilometers per hour for the hour average, and it will actually calculate a recommended CTP for you for your race distance, either 70.3 or Ironman. Once that's calculated, you can then work with training peaks, and I'll go through that in the next session, to see will it fit from where you are now in terms of your CTL to where you need to be at race day, and you can actually see if your ramp rates exceed the recommended of 8 to 10 or 8 to 11, and then you can actually really focus on how much time you need and lead up to your race. When do you need to really start focusing on training? Or two, is it realistic? Are you going to have to ramp up higher than the recommended, and you might need to actually peel back and actually drop the CTL targets for your race day? But that's all in the next session. Again, not important to know the details of these, how they're calculated, but it's just important to know what they are, because they do come up when you're doing your training plan calculations. That's it for now. Next session coming up shortly.